In this video, as well as the following few videos, I'm going to guide you through the entire process of creating this here L115 sniper rifle. Now this entire model was created in just one sitting, and I'm a little bit sick today, so my voice is a little bit off. But if you haven't already, guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. And before we begin, if you have any comments or any questions, just make sure you drop them down below. I always do my best to respond to as many comments as I can. Now we have a reference here in the background, or a blueprint, or whatever you want to call it. It's just a picture of the rifle from the side. And we also added some transparency to that, so it's not too bright, so it doesn't hurt our eyes. And we're going to delete the default cube because we don't want to start with a default cube. We're not going to start with this part over here, which seems like the intuitive place to start, because it is the easiest part of the gun to make. Instead, we're going to start over here from the trigger. And we're going to start by adding in a circle with 12 vertices, and we're going to align the circle with our view. Okay. So let's scale that circle down, and we're going to use that to make this hole for the trigger here. Okay. I'm going to place that in there, and we're just going to kind of stretch it out so it fits on the inside of this trigger frame, if you can call it that. Now let's select this whole circle. Let's extrude it and right click so this snaps back into place. We're going to use Alt-S to scale this part up, or to just kind of add some thickness to this circle, just so we can get the outer edge of this trigger. Now we're also going to take our time to just align this a little bit better with the outer edges of the trigger frame here. Just a little bit, it doesn't matter too much because we are going to be using subdivision surface modifiers later. So this is going to be quite different soon after we get a little bit deeper into the modeling process. So don't worry about this too much. But for now, we're just going to align the inner edge with the inner part of this circle here, and the outer edge with this kind of outer part. You can see by the shading where the outer part of this frame might be. Now, as you would imagine, we're going to use some of these edges and vertices around the circle here to make the rest of this model here. So for example, we're going to take these 3 or 4 edges over here, and we're going to extrude them up. We're going to flatten them out, and we're going to bring them up here to the top of this gun. Now we can use some of these edges to kind of model out some of these parts, like this slope part here, or this flat part. We're going to do something similar over here. And we're also going to use this edge in the front here to make this part where the magazine is located. Now we're going to kind of trace this a lot around the rest of the body of the gun here by just using Control and left click. Okay, we're just going to kind of extrude this out and put it into place until we have about 5 vertices around this circle. Maybe we can use some loop tools to kind of even this out so it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to use some loop tools to space them out a little better. I'm going to do the same thing up here, just so they look a little bit more aesthetic and not so messy like a child made them. And then we're just going to keep tracing these edges all the way around the rest of the gun. We're going to use this edge at the bottom. And this is just going to act as a loop cut to keep our subdivision surface modifier in place afterwards. So for what I mean by that is if we have a cube with a subdivision surface modifier, you already know that when you add a loop cut to that, it kind of flattens out that side of the object. And this is exactly what this edge loop is going to do on the bottom here. So we're just going to leave this pretty close for now, but we're probably going to have to add another one anyway. Now we can just take this entire edge loop and just extrude that upwards and flatten it out to make the top part of this model here. I'm going to flatten that out with the 3D cursor and just use these couple of edges. We're going to remove the double edges here, and we're going to use these vertices here to make the top part of the body here. And we also can make this little slope part over here. Okay, I'm going to align that vertex right there. And this is going to be pretty much the front part of our mesh. Now, before we get busy with the back part here, let's go over here to the front, and let's make sure that we get this rounded part a little bit more nicely. So we're going to add a couple of loop cuts over here. Let's say 3 loop cuts in the middle, and we're just going to align these vertices here so that they give us a more rounded shape at the front here. Now keep in mind, we are going to use a subdivision surface modifier, so this is going to look a little bit nicer afterwards. but this is just roughly the shape that we want for now. And then we're going to use this edge over here to extrude this part in the back. Maybe it'll be wiser to bring this edge a little bit higher up. Maybe we should just flatten all this out together like this. And now we're going to use these two edges to make this part around the hand grip of the gun here. So we're going to add a loop cut so everything blends in together nicely there. And we're going to kind of extrude this part downwards. See if we can pull this a little bit closer over here. Extrude this out. Let's take it back to our median point here. Extrude this out a couple of times and just take it all the way to the bottom. All the way to the bottom down here. And we're also going to use this part to extrude out this piece in the back here, in the back of the hand grip. And then we're going to stop obviously over here where the separation is located between the hand grip and the buttstock. Now we also need a loop cut here down the middle because this part, as you would imagine, is going to be kind of round. Because you want to hold this part, it shouldn't be completely sharp on the edges in the back. So these parts are going to be a little bit narrower than the part in the middle. Now we're also going to add a few more faces over here. We're going to use our 3D cursor here to snap these together, like so. Snap those together. And we're also going to extrude a little part back here, just so these all blend together and fit together well. We can fill that part in. Now let's go ahead and add some thickness to our model just so we see what we're working with here. Something like this. And then what's going to happen is, well, we should probably delete some of these faces just so we can add, just so we can work with these. We can select this edge loop here better. We're going to select these edges as well, and then we're going to scale those down on the x-axis. As you can see, that kind of gives it a more organic looking shape, and this is kind of what we want the handle to look like. Again, we are still going to use a subdivision surface modifier, so this is going to look a lot more detailed, but this is just to get the idea for now. Okay. Now we're also going to go down here and we're going to extrude. A couple more of these parts here. Extrude this down a little and just scale it down on the x-axis a little bit. This is going to help us again to flatten out that part of the subdivision surface modifier. And we're going to take care of this only after we add the modifier, because right now it's kind of hard to eyeball it. Okay, something like that. Now before we add the subdivision surface modifier, it's probably best if we start making this part first in the back, because this is probably the trickiest part of this gun. So what we're going to do is we have these three faces here, okay? And we're going to extrude those out, and we're only going to use two of the faces to make this kind of part between these two lines. You can see that there's a slightly shaded part which is a bit more narrow than this part here. We're going to use two of these faces to make that part, and this face at the bottom here is going to be used for this little part, this little connecting piece down here. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to extrude them one by one. Maybe it would help if we have our 3D cursor as a pivot point over here in the middle. Something like that. Okay, let's scale that down a little. One more time. And we're going to do that as many times as we need until we create a full revolution around this entire spiral, or whatever you want to call it. Shoot it there. Bring it out here. And this needs to be a little smaller still, so we are going to scale it down a little bit more, just like that. Now we are going to manually make sure that all these vertices fit inside of the shaded part here. But it doesn't have to be exact, as long as it's approximately what we need. And then this part, as I said, we're going to use for this part at the bottom here. We're going to extrude that out like so. But we're going to leave it here for now because we need to make the rest of our buttstock first. We're going to extrude these parts over here. Let's extrude this face here to make the first part. And then we're going to use these three faces and extrude them backwards and make the main part of our buttstock. This is going to be the main shape here. And now at the bottom of the buttstock, we're going to take this face, we're going to extrude it, and we're going to kind of narrow it down a little. And again, this is not only going to help with our subdivision surface modifier, but it is also going to help create this kind of shaded part at the bottom there. So once we pull this backwards a little more, we can align these edges like so. We're going to once again use a 3D cursor to scale this down and bring these vertices together. And as you can see, the topology on this now seems quite reasonable. Except we still have to bring these together on the x-axis. So let's do that. And now this is quite well connected. Now we have to go up here and we have to make sure that we have a clear separation between the top part and the bottom part here. So we're gonna bring this forward a little bit. We're gonna extrude it out, but this part, it has to be a little bit further to the back, like this, because as you can see, there's another piece kind of sticking out down here, which is separated from this part at the top. Now let's see what this looks like if we add our subdivision surface modifier. We can add about 2 subdivisions for now. And we have to make sure to correct our normals to remove our doubles and all that stuff. And as you can see, first of all, when we look at the front, it looks way too round on all these parts. But thankfully, that's an easy fix, because we're going to do just what we did with this loop cut over here. And in fact, we're going to add another loop cut right at the bottom of this one, so it kind of tightens this together a little bit more. I'm going to add a loop cut right there and just pull everything down a little, just like that. And of course, we're going to do the exact same thing at the top, just like so. And then we also have to make sure that we make these parts a little bit less round, because these angles have to be a lot more sharp, as you can see in the blueprint in the background. So we're going to bring a couple of loop cuts close together, like this. The closer you bring them, the sharper the edge is going to be there. I'm going to bring these a little bit closer. And we're also going to do that around this little circle that we made here. Now you may want to take your time to readjust what your circle looks like. If it's not very circular, I'm going to just make it a little bit wider at the top. But I think it looks fine here. Now we are also going to straighten out some of these edges in the back here, or at the top, such as this one here. And also this one down here. Now at the bottom, we might also have to do it over here, but this is not really going to help, so we're only going to add one here in between. And if we scale it up on the x-axis a little bit, that's going to make it a little bit more round, but not too round. Now we're going to delete these 2 faces back here. And maybe we should undo this loop cut before we proceed with this part. But let's extrude these. Let's fill these 2 faces together. And then we are going to extrude this part again. And extruding this acts the same way as adding a loop cut there. It's just going to flatten out that face a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing here. A couple of loop cuts just to flatten this part out. And we also want to bring these a little bit closer together, just so they're quite obviously connected together. Or just so they look like they're connected together. Now we also want to sharpen this part here. We're going to bring these vertices a little bit more to the front. And again, we're going to accompany that with a loop cut, just so these fit together a little bit better. Let's scale this down a little, just a little, so that this part is a little bit sharper. And we're going to add a loop cut here, so there's more of a separation between the round part. We have a couple of extra faces lying underneath here, so let's delete those. May have a few more somewhere down here. Faces that we don't need, but we're just going to delete those. And another loop cut right there is going to help us with this part. Let's just add some smooth shading to our entire model just to make it look a little nicer for now. And then let's take a look at whether we need to do something else here. For example, we do need to add a couple of loop cuts here to this trigger frame to make this part a little bit sharper and a little bit wider as well. We're going to do that on both sides. Something like that. Now maybe the inner part shouldn't be quite as sharp, so maybe we can undo that loop cut there. Or maybe we're just going to add a loop cut a little bit further away from the edges. A little bit further away from the edges, like that. And we're also going to break apart some of these edges so we have none of these very obvious flat spots or very obvious angles here in between. Now we can go down here and let's just add a quick couple of loop cuts here to the sides. I'm going to add like 5, but then we're going to undo the ones in the middle. And the reason for that is just because we want them to be spaced out equally from the sides. And then we're going to go down here and we're going to add the hole for our magazine, which means we're going to select these faces and maybe a couple more here in the front. We're going to take those faces, we're going to extrude them, we're going to lift them up and inwards into the gun, flatten those out, and then of course we are going to add a couple of loop cuts there to make this a more square hole. Loop cut over here. And I think this is fine for now for a magazine hole. Now I think that our entire gun should be a little bit wider, just a little bit. And now let's see what these loop cuts that we just created in the front did to our hand grip, because obviously we don't want these to be too sharp. So we're just going to kind of take some of these faces and just scale them down a little, just to move those edge loops away from the edges a little bit. We're going to do the same over here. So once we select the loop cut in the middle, or the edge loop, or the face loop in the middle, we can just kind of scale that down, move it away from the edges, and that's going to make it a little bit less sharp around that part. Okay, let's fill this face in. Get rid of this edge for now. Fill this face in. And we're just going to leave this as it is for now, because for now we're only going to be modeling the organic parts of this gun. There's something happened with my my X-ray vision, and we're not going to be focusing on the hard surface modeling parts here just yet, which include this hinge here and this pad here in the back and the scope and the barrel and all that. For now, we're just going to finish the main body of the gun, which means we also have to get back here to the back of the gun. And you can see that we have this little bump here. So let's just extrude that out really quick. We're going to extrude this face, scale it down on the x-axis a little, and just push this backwards a little bit. Now let's see what happens. Now this is not quite as sharp as we want it to be. I'm going to add a loop cut there. I'm going to add another loop cut here, just to kind of sharpen this a little bit more. Maybe we can lift it up a little further. Something like that is going to cut it. I think this is just fine. And let's add a loop cut to the back here so that we can create this hole that we have in the back where there's this kind of screw located which holds the rear padding. I'm going to take that and we're going to extrude this face inwards. This face inwards, but we're going to delete the face in the back. So this hole is kind of like a semicircle. Now let's see. We're going to need a loop cut there, that's for sure. And a loop cut here. Now keep in mind that whenever you're using hard surface modeling, whenever you're using subdivision surface modifiers in some kind of organic modeling, you're going to need a lot of these loop cuts to kind of straighten something out or to make sure it's not too round, where you don't want it to be round too much, so you can get these kind of shapes. In this case, we're going to pull this one backwards a little bit. See, the more backwards you pull it, it becomes more circular, and it becomes more oval, more than anything else. But if you bring it closer, then it becomes more squarey. So we're going to put it kind of in the middle, something like that. And let's bring these faces just a little bit closer to the surface. And now this is more or less the back part of the gun here. Now, as you can see, the main shape of our gun is almost ready. We just have a few more details that we have to work with. Namely, that's going to be this part down here, because we want to bring these a little bit closer together. I'm going to bring these a little bit closer together just so they look like they're connecting, because right now they don't. They don't connect at all. There's clearly a gap between them, which doesn't look very realistic at all. Bring these together a little bit closer. Maybe a couple of more loop cuts are going to help us there. Now, in the skeleton of the mesh, you might see that there's some collision happening there, or some clipping, but that's not a problem. That's not a problem because it still looks quite realistic here. And then, of course, we are going to have to make sure that these two meshes align with each other. We ran into some trouble there. Seems that we have some doubles happening there. So let's make sure that we merge these vertices together and we don't get any of these problems here. And then we're going to select these. Maybe this will be a good time to add a mirror modifier here. I'm going to add a loop cut around this entire face. And I'm going to select everything. Select everything there. And I want to delete this half. But I also want to make sure not to select anything from this part of the gun. So let me try selecting this loose part, and then I'm just going to use my brush select to deselect one half of this object. And that way I know that I don't have anything selected from the other half, or from the other side of this object, because I just selected the loose part, so nothing from this part can be selected. And we delete this half, and hopefully we only deleted that one half. And we can go ahead and add, if we separate this into a new object, then we can go ahead and add a mirror modifier. This is probably something we should have done right from the beginning. That's a little strange. We're going to place our origin there, and we're going to place this before the subdivision surface modifier. Now you can see that we have this little issue here because this hole is not supposed to be on both sides as far as I know. But I don't have a picture of both sides of the gun, so I'm not entirely sure. But that's not a problem because we can just correct that later. We are going to make this hole a little bit wider though. And now, as we were going to do, let's select this part of the mesh. Select this part and just pull it outwards a little bit. I'm going to pull it outwards so it kind of overlaps, so it kind of fits perfectly with this other part of the mesh. And maybe, just maybe, it would be nice if we took some of these edges from the bottom here and we pulled them backwards a little bit, because maybe we want this part to be a little bit more round than the other parts. Something like this. And we're going to do the same thing up on top here. 3 loop cuts, we don't need quite that many. There we go. Now here, another issue is that these parts don't look that sharp as these parts at the top here. So we're also going to move some of these edges backwards a little bit more, just so it's constant or consistent with how sharp the mesh is. Now that looks a little bit better. Let's not spend too much time on that. For now, we also want to make sure that we get our little dent here in the front. We have a hole in the front here, and we also have this long line in the front of the gun. So for that long line, first, let's take this big face in the front here. If you have a loop cut there, that's fine as well. You can just select two faces like this. And then we're going to press I to insert a face. And we're going to see if we can figure out exactly where that edge is located. It starts right after this hole here, let's say, and it goes back to this angle here. So something like this. Yeah, I'm going to select a couple of faces instead. I'm going to select these three faces, and then I'm going to insert a face. Or maybe that's not the best idea. Let's just focus on one face for now, because otherwise there's too many edges on the side here. I'm not going to be able to control the sharpness too well. So let's do something like that. Something like that. And if I pull this inwards just a little bit, pull this inward just a little bit, we can, we don't want it to be too deep, because then it's going to be too sharp an edge. And then just a couple more loop cuts just to make it a little bit softer. Make it a little bit softer, and it's going to look pretty nice like that. And then we also have to do something similar to what we did in the back. So we're going to take a couple of faces in the front here. Couple of faces in the front. Now when I look again, it seems like these two holes are kind of connected. These two holes are kind of connected. So let's take these two faces, extrude them, and scale them down. It's a bit more than two faces, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And then maybe we can take these and use our loop tools to circulate them. If this doesn't end up being way too messy, let's see what happens. We can just turn these into a nice circle and then extrude them inwards. And as you can see, this gives us a pretty perfect circular hole, except it needs to be a little bit wider than just a normal circle. So let's try to get something closer to the shape that we really need here. For instance, by just pulling these apart a little bit. Now this is not a perfect hole by any means. It's a little rough there, but that's all right. Our subdivision surface modifier is going to help us with that. Push that inwards a little bit. And now it's only a matter of how deep we want this hole to go. And since we don't want it to go too deep, we're going to go with something like that. We're going to add a loop cut right there. Now, since these two holes are connected, I'm just going to go take my time. Let's remove the subdivision surface modifier here. And just try to kind of connect these edges here a little bit. Just so this at least somewhat looks like it's part of the same hole. Just a little bit, like that. And now when we bring our subdivision surface back, now these two look kind of connected. And then it's up to you to just play around with some of these other parts and see what works best here. But again, I don't want to split hairs too much here, so I'm just going to leave it like this for now. We're now finished with the main body of our sniper rifle, and we're going to take a little break at this point. In the next episode, we're going to start adding some more details to this sniper rifle, so the next episode is going to be more focused on pure hard surface modeling. Remember to subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, just drop them down below, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I can. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I really hope to see you in the next one as well.